Hey friends, welcome back to a FaceTime with MENTL.SESH. I am sitting down with one of my best friends, but also the Kris Jenner to my life and a multifaceted, many hat wearing badass lady, Katherine Johnsen. How are we, KJ?
Hi. Oh my God, this is fun. We talk 15 times a day, but usually not recorded, thank goodness.
Yeah, I know, it's so different, like interviewing and not just talking about life, but we'll hopefully make it as natural like our normal conversations go.
I'm excited to be on here because you've had some fun chats. So I'm excited for us to switch hats and have this conversation.
Yeah. So I know everything that you do, but I'm going to do what you do on our work calls. And I'm going to have you sell yourself and tell everyone who's tuning in what all you're involved in. There's so many between counterculture, Common Ace, your own personal, endeavors as a creative startup, the startup community. Give a spiel, give us a rundown of everything that you're a part of.
My gosh, I know it's like sometimes I'm like, oh boy, do we do too many things, but we're having fun. So I'm a partner in Counterculture, which is a fabulous creative agency out of Toronto. We obviously have an amazing roster of creators like yourself. We run influencer programs for brands like McDonald's, Puma, and then we also have a fabulous roster of clients, predominantly e-com D2C brands that we help with user acquisition and growth. So that's kind of where I spend my day to day, which is amazing. I have also recently taken over a company called Common Ace, which is a one-stop shop for women's sneakers, an amazing community for what I like to say is the sneaker curious women, kind of the people that I think are in your or my DMs a lot that are like, I love those shoes. Like I have no idea where to get them. My background is in the startup space, which is how I kind of came to this beautiful point of Common Ace, which kind of merges my love of like streetwear and fashion and the social media world with the startup world. And I'm still super involved in a lot of the events that we produce and stuff. So it's great because I think there's just this huge crossover between like creatives and entrepreneurship and technology and social and marketing and like all of that stuff. And I feel really fortunate to have all of my worlds kind of blend into one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I say this all the time to whenever I'm like talking about you to friends or to other people in general. I'm like, I don't know how KJ does it all, but you do it with the most grace and the most like positive attitude that like most people I think would be burnt out like almost instantaneously. Even just hearing like it, I'm like, holy shit, it's a lot. But like my first question when it comes to just mental health, like how do you find the balance in all of it? And like, do you find that you have to almost like shift your mindset at all depending on like what hat you're wearing in each situation?
Yeah, I think it's twofold for me because I definitely feel like I derive a lot of my energy from doing all these things. Like the more that I am involved in, and I love helping bring other people's ideas and dreams to life as well, which is obviously why I love like so much of the work you and I get to do together. That fuels me. Like I feel I'm like more excited to do more as I get to do those things. But at the same time, I often feel spread kind of thin. And I'm like, well, shoot, if I was just doing this one thing, would I get it so much further? So I think it's interesting. I do really believe that people are just like, we're all built differently because we just can't compare ourselves. Someone's like comfort level of how they operate just doesn't compare to someone else's. Like I genuinely am really happy vibrating at this frequency. And I mean, you and I have a friendship, so there are certainly times where I hit my moment of like, I need to just shut myself in my condo in Toronto for 2 days and like put my phone on do not disturb and like recharge my energy. But otherwise, I do feel very fueled by all of these projects.
Mm-hmm. Would you say you're more like introverted generally, extroverted, an introverted extrovert, or an extroverted introvert?
I feel like I mix up the definitions because I am extroverted, but I definitely recharge with my alone time. Like I will bleed for my friends and my people. Like I'm like, I am here, I'm listening, like I want to be there. And then I'll know when I hit my point of like, I just need to have no external like anything, no external stimulation, and just like be zen. So I think I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. My therapist actually, and this is something now that I kind of use in sessions with clients, is she described like the difference between like extrovert and introvert, or, being a mix of both, where some people have a fully charged battery. And when they go out into social situations, the more social interaction they have, the more that battery starts to deplete. But no, it was a good visual, because I think for the longest time, I honestly thought I was like an extrovert. And I don't know, maybe I was pre-COVID, but definitely after COVID, I find that I have shifted a lot, and like I'm very content staying in. It takes a lot for me to like put myself out in social situations. And now when I do go out, like I get tired super easily. I just feel this like sudden shift of like my battery is drained. So like that's another question I have, is like, how do you know when you need to have those couple days to just recharge? Like what symptoms, or like what do you feel like in your body, or like what does your kind of thought process look like for you to have like that, oh, that's a clue, I need to kind of chill?
Yeah, I like actually like that visual, because I think what I've realized so much over the past few years is there are certain people that I'm around that I feel like fill my cup, and there are certain people that I feel like drain the battery. And I think people can switch, like people are going through different things in their lives, and there's certain things you have to do, like certain work obligations or whatever, that may kind of drain your battery. But I definitely pay more attention to who I leave feeling energized and positive and good around, versus people that I leave and I feel like, oh, that was like really draining or really negative, that obviously depleted my energy or whatever that is. For me, my mood is a big indicator. Like I consider myself to be a pretty consistently positive person, and I try to really not sweat the small stuff. I mean, you see, I'll be like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, well, I guess, wasn't meant to be, or we got to find another way, or whatever that is. And, a missed flight, a delay, like, something you're looking forward to getting canceled. It is what it is. I kind of go by burnt toast theory. But when I find myself getting really short or snippy or just hypersensitive, I know that in myself. If I'm like, I'm on the brink of tears for something that shouldn't be making me feel that way, that's usually my moment of like, okay, we need to reset. Like I'm feeling low. And I've never been someone to really journal. I have just not been able to get into it. I have so many friends that do it. I know it's something you've encouraged me to do. And over the past year, I would say it's something that I've started to do that really helps me in those moments, because I just like put everything out that I'm feeling, even if it makes no sense. Like if I read it back, I'd be like, what was this sentence? But I'm just like, I'm so frustrated because of this, and I feel this way, and I wish it was this way, and I want to say this, and whatever it is. And like, then I'm just kind of like, okay, my thoughts are out. And that's how I like take my first step in just like resetting myself. But I think that's my biggest indicator, is like when I feel like I am hypersensitive, like I'm like, I'm going to cry because the fire alarm went off. I'm like, we got to rein it in.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point. It's just like paying mind to your environment, like where you're at, who you're around, what you're doing, all of those details, because it isn't a black or white type of thing. Like there are a lot of gray areas when it comes to mental health and just how we feel. And I think, the more insight and awareness, I think self-awareness is super important, just in the idea of like self-care. Because if we know what works for us, what doesn't work for us, whether it's coping skills or whether it's just like putting ourselves out there in the world, that really helps us live our lives, to the best potential that we can, in like the healthiest, mentally healthiest way possible. But also, like, you're probably someone who finds like the silver lining in a lot of things. You mentioned just like, missing flights or having delays. Speaking of traveling, I have a couple questions. Are there any cities or places that come to mind that you like when you think of environment and just how you feel mentally, that are places that really, inspire you and make you feel safe and all warm and fuzzy inside? Or on the contrary, are there any places that maybe aren't as good for your mental health? And how do you kind of prepare for going into any of those scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. I've become so much more acutely aware of that over the past couple years because I am so frequently in different places, and I'm someone who doesn't really identify with like home as a place. It's much more the people that I'm with. And I feel like it's a catch-22 for me because, for example, in New York, I have so many people that I love and like very good friends there. So I'm like so happy to be in an environment like that. I love the fast-paced energy. I feel very fueled and motivated in that type of environment. Somewhere like LA, I'm so happy with just like the weather and the proximity to water. However, you know, like I broke my nose when I was maybe like 14, and I just have never like gotten it fixed. And it doesn't really bother me, but I find like when I spend, you know, like sometimes I'll spend 2 to 3 weeks in LA at a time. I'll have these moments where I'm like, should I get my nose done? And it's so funny because I just realized the environment that I'm in there is just like everybody looks kind of the same. There's like a lot of carbon copies of each other, and there's a certain beauty standard, and there's a certain like you live in this bubble. And I have to check in with myself in those moments. And I'm like, is that what you want? Or are you just spending like so much time in a certain environment that makes you feel a certain way about yourself? And so I always say, like, I don't like to blame a place. I'm like, I need to be able to interact with, you know, different environments and people on my own. And I got to figure out why, for me, like that triggers me in some way. But it's so funny. Like, my absolute favorite place in the world that I think like surprises people because I'm such a city girl. I love Tofino. It's in northern BC. It's about a 5-hour ferry and like a 5-hour drive from Vancouver. And I'm going back in a couple of weeks. I usually go like once a year for a good week, because it's just like you're in like a northern BC surf town. I'm like at my absolute happiest there. Like I absolutely love it. I'm like, it's stormy, it's raining, you can dive in the ocean. I'm just like, I feel really good about this. So I think for me, it's the balance. Like, I know that if I just had that city go 100%, or the sort of like LA influencer lifestyle, I just wouldn't feel like me. Like, I think the reason I'm able to show up in those environments and smile and like bring my energy is because I have those like moments of like with my family, or in Montreal with my business partners who are like my family, and we like are watching movies on the couch and drinking red wine, you know, like those. I think it's the balance for me that keeps me sane.
Yeah, yeah. Too much of one thing is never good. And those wholesome moments are so, so important. I like talk to some of my clients about this. I'm like, you know, you need to find a friend who's like in an industry that just doesn't do anything related to what you do, because it's not only is it just like refreshing, it's extremely humbling, especially when you're like a creative, like, you know, Kristen
Yeah,
and
and my Julia, like you and I
yeah,
both have that person. Yeah.
and you know, it's great because they just, you know, they're like your friend for the right reasons. And I think as creatives, that's something that, you know, I personally struggle with, is just trying to decipher and navigate those areas of like, you know, who sees, you know, my following or my connections, and who's trying to really befriend me for the right reasons, or because of other, you know, reasons that aren't as genuine. And I'm curious, like, do you ever experience that? Like, how do you, because you network really well. Like, you're someone who, like, I think for a lot of people, whether you're freelance or a creator or creative of some type, like putting yourself out there and networking is a big part of that. But I think it's also extremely intimidating for a lot of people to, you know, just like slide in someone's DM, start a conversation, even though that's kind of like the whole premise of social media, right? But you do that really well. What are some tips, or like what is some advice you would give in that regard?
I thank you, first of all, because that's something that I really do try to be really intentional with. And a really good friend of mine, he worked at Microsoft when I was like producing Startup Fest years ago. And I remember I was like 20, and I think we were at Slush in Helsinki, and he gave this talk where he just was saying like, he was listed at that point as top 10 guys to know in the New York startup scene because of his network was so amazing. And he just said, you know, I reach out to people when I don't need anything. Like, and he does, like, he'll tap me and he'll just be like, hey, how are you? I saw this article. I thought of you. I just wanted to send it through. And I very much try to do that with my relationships. Like, I think it's really important to maintain authentic relationships, because then people are more than happy to help you in the off chance you need to tap them. But like, yes, things are transactional in so many ways in our relationships, in our lives, regardless. You know, even you look at like a merit, it's transactional. You get something out of what you give as well. But I just think for me, I'm more than happy to pass an intro to someone, or if I can help you out, like I'm more than happy to do that. But when you maintain an authentic relationship with people, it becomes so much easier to do so. And I would say every great thing that has happened to me in my life has come through an authentic relationship where we connected over a shared interest, or, you know, an accolade someone had that I was, you know, giving them their flowers for. And I think that my advice would be to always shoot your shot. Like I think you'd be surprised at the people that would answer their DMs if you reached out to them with an intentional either compliment or thought or, you know, way of connection. And I think the second thing is give more than you take. Ivy knows, like, just like, you know, dogs are out here selflessly giving.
Yep.
I think it's really important to give more than you take. And like, when you have the opportunity to put someone on, when you have the opportunity to include someone in something, when you have the opportunity to drop someone's name in a room, do that, because it will come back to you. And I know that sometimes in the moment it can feel like, well, like I'm just putting everyone on, and what the heck does anyone else do for me? But I'm just a really big believer that like, you will get back what you put out into the world. It might not be right now, it might not be tomorrow, but it will come. And I think that that's just like the most important thing. And I see people do this all the time. Like I always say, I get hit up in my DMs all the time for like, can you help me get this shoe or whatever? And it's always from someone I've like maybe met once or like don't even know. And yet my closest friends never once has like Julia been like, could you help me? Like, you know, even our creators that we work with, who I'd be more than happy to help out. And it's because, you know, when you have like a real authentic friendship with someone, you're like, oh shoot, like I don't want to ask them for something, I don't want to use whatever. And the irony is that those are the people that genuinely are really happy to help you. Like you could call me any minute of the day and be like, I could use, and I'd be like, how can I help you? Like, of course, you're an amazing friend to me. And so I think if you like approach every relationship with what value can I bring this person, either in like just being a super kind person, being a good listener, being like leaving space for their achievements. I think that's something I feel really strongly about as well. Like if you can't be excited for other people and the wins that they have, you need to really check in with yourself, because you can't expect people to show up for you and support you if you aren't able to make space for their wins and moments that you're having losses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even say too, like along the line of that is also just getting to know people outside of what they do for their career. You know, like I love when I get to find out about someone's like, oh, family, like what's, you know, sharing stories about family, or like just random like music interests, or just like who they are as a person. I think things like that really, you know, help connect people on even a deeper level. And it's really those deep connections that feel fulfilling. You know, they feel good, and you feel like you can really form a trusting relationship with that person. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think that's so true. What are some of the struggles, I guess, you know, as a creator now, because you do also, you know, you do influencer work, you're out here influencing the girls with all the looks on the IG. What are some of the struggles you experience just like having a public platform and, you know, having people kind of look to you for
sure. I mean, I think there's so many, and it's so funny because for every message you get of someone being like, wow, like I would love, like your career is so inspirational to me and I love following you and I just wanted you to know, like, if I could ever work for you or whatever, like I would be so excited. You know, there's a million people that just love to kind of watch what you're doing and not support. And I think that's something I've always struggled with. Like when I look at Instagram versus TikTok as a platform, I feel like Instagram is filled with watchers. Like you look at your story views versus your engagement on your posts or reels, and it's crazy. I'm like, oh, you all are the first to see what's going on, but you're certainly not out here toss in a like or support on like a new project I'm launching or whatever that might be. Whereas TikTok, I find, is like kind of a much more collaborative community. For sure, there's a million, viewers that don't participate, but it has this like innate positivity that I find, unlike Instagram. And that's something that I struggle with often, is like the weight of other people's opinions, as much as I am such a believer in like, just stay in your own lane. And if you're out doing good and putting good into the world and like just minding your own business and like doing what you want to be doing, anyone who has something to say is someone's opinion I don't really care about, quite frankly. But it's still hard sometimes. And I think for me too, I've kind of coined myself in this space in the sneaker world as like being a bridge of accessibility. I think, as you and I both know, the sneaker and streetwear community can feel kind of intimidating, a little bit exclusionary at times, and especially the women's space at times, because women have had to work so hard to even get the respect in the space in the first place. And I've now created this platform that to me is all about, the women that don't know the difference between a Jordan and a Dunk, and they don't need to, just to like get their hands on a shoe that they're going to be happy to wear to work, with their Aritzia effortless pants. Yep. But at the end of the day, like, to me, it's not that serious, and I wear that saying across most aspects of my life. And I think the last piece is like, just people have so many preconceived notions about you based on how you present yourself on social media. Like, I will so often meet someone who's only followed me on Instagram and they're like, oh, you're like much more laid back in person, or you're much more, oh, you don't talk about sneakers like 24/7. I'm like, no, like,
shocker. I have a life.
I'm like very low key. And I think too, like, it's just so important to remember that you see like 4% of someone's life at most on social media. Like, this very well. My brother went through a really like scary year last year with a wild cancer battle, and he is 100% fine and thriving and great now, which is amazing. I'm so blessed to say that. We love QJ. But what was so interesting, and that's obviously impacted me like so much now, in how I just live my life, but you wouldn't know that if you followed me on social media last year. Like, I certainly wasn't out here being like, oh, just had the worst day of my life, because I don't feel like showing up that way. And it's not out of, I don't want people to know. I was just in a state of, processing that myself. But I think that's why I feel it's so important when you are on the internet as a viewer or someone participating, like, you genuinely do not know what people are going through. And it is just so important to be kind. Like, you have no idea. You can pass all the judgment you want. I guarantee you have no idea what happened to that guy this morning, or what's happening in his family or his work or his anything. And so, yeah, I definitely, the last thing I'll say in my diatribe here is like, sometimes I just disappear off social for a week or two because I just don't feel like being there. It doesn't make me feel good. I'm not happy seeing what everyone else is up to. I'm maybe like dragging my feet on a project, or not feeling like I'm doing enough. And that adds to my not enoughness. And so knowing in those moments that I need to like check out for myself, and I don't care if that means my TikTok views are down next week, or, maybe I missed out on X partnership, because at the end of the day, like, I can't show up for any of those people if I can't show up for myself.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup, or, even the saying, like, don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You can't, and I think that's the hardest part, especially when people who tend to be like people pleasers, we have a hard time, myself included. We have a hard time setting those boundaries, not necessarily for other people, but for ourselves. And that's a struggle. But even, online, is setting a boundary. That's not for anyone else. That's for yourself, and I think that's a very important thing. So, okay, you also talked about, your experience in the startup space, and I think, I would say, just from working with different founders as a therapist, like, from what I've heard, being a woman, like you said, even in sneakers and streetwear, is challenging at times. Like, how was that experience for you in the startup space? And like, did you, how do you still stay true to yourself while also kind of garnering respect and, proving your worth?
Yeah. And that's a conversation I have like often with you know, a lot of girlfriends, even, you know, one of my really good girlfriends, Julia, who is getting a lot of airtime in this conversation, like she's an engineer at Amazon. She's brilliant. And she's also beautiful and really fun. And we have that conversation often of how you like balance those two aspects of your life. And, you know, I have worked in this, you know, tech world since I was like 18 with a lot of men that were a big part of the Me Too movement of that time out of the Valley and stuff. And there are definitely moments where I'm like, I'm not going to put this on social media. I'm not going, as much as like I, you know, love this shot. I'm having a great time in Hawaii. Like I just know that I can't show up in the way that I want to in a business setting. With also having that aspect of myself out there to be perceived in X different ways. And I think it's a line you have to walk. And I know that we all may feel, you know, very strongly about what I should be able to do and still be able to do this, but there's just a reality of what our world is still like. And I will, you know, I'll be on a call with a friend of mine at X tech company and he'll be like, looks like you're having a great time in Montauk this weekend. Loved your whatever photo. And I'm like, okay, let's move on to the meat of this conversation. So I think it's something that I just am unapologetic about not needing to exist in only one way that makes people feel comfortable. And that's something that I feel really strongly about. Like you'll see me post about like a new alphabet for AI that Alistair, who I worked with forever, is authoring. And then I'm going to post like me in my cowboy boots and a football jersey, like running down the street. And those two things can coexist. I'm like, you can be really smart and you can be into fashion and sneakers. Like those things can coexist. I can think of a million people I know that fall into those buckets. And so I think it's just about like being yourself. And no matter what, somebody's going to have something to say. Like, no matter what, even if you were like, well, you know, we all, you know, I could be the nicest person in the entire world and someone's still not going to like me. And so I think it's just about being like, you know, if I can sleep well at night, knowing how I showed up, how I represented myself, I have to let the rest go. And that's kind of my dad has always said to me, whenever I'm struggling with a decision, whether it's about like, you know, how I show up on social media or how to deal with a, you know, adversity in my life, he's like, I think about the judge test. Like, think of whose opinion you care really deeply about in your life. And if you had to go up to them and explain the situation and explain the decision that you made, would you be proud of your decision? And if your answer is yes, great.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, if I'm like, should I do this or should I whatever, I think about that. I think about, you know, all the people in my life I really deeply respect. And I'm like, if I had to explain that to them, if I had to explain it to, you know, you guys or to Ash and Tara, to my parents, to my, you know, would I feel like, yeah, I'm glad I made that decision. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like just even having a, you know, being a creator, having like a following, it's so important to practice what you preach. And like, if that's something that, you know, like, because there's comes a time where like people meet you in real life, or you know, people know people who've met you or know people who know you, or word gets out. And you know, I think it's so important when it's so, well, the whole saying like don't meet your idols, like that exists for a reason, because there are people, you know, unfortunately, that don't always practice what they preach or don't show up in the ways that they might say online. And I think, you know, being able to be that person authentically just really proves that like you're not going to ever just fit in a box. And that's the goal, you know, like we shouldn't be shoved in a box. And we're more multifaceted and complex. Like, God, if I don't know if anyone who might be watching this has ever dissected a human body before. I have in science college. This is getting real deep, but it's complex. The human body is complex. I say all this to say, and I saw it in real life with my own two eyes. It is very complex. And to then be put into a box and be confined, you know, it doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. So I'm just gonna say, if anyone's trying to put me in a box, I'm gonna tell them to go do surgery and see how that works.
100%.
All right, last couple questions that are fun. What are your go-to means of self-care? Like how do you kind of rest and recharge?
Definitely getting outside in some capacity. Like I just feel so good to be by water. Like in Toronto, I'm quite close to the lake. Obviously, Toronto's on a lake. So I love to get out there. I love to just like walk and listen to a podcast, and just that clears my head. Like I said, I have started journaling pretty inconsistently, I would say, but just like when I need to, it feels like such a great way for me to just brain dump, because I definitely feel like I have a million things running around in here all the time. And I think for me too, it's like knowing the people that fill my cup, because I definitely have those people. I mean, like my business partners live out in Montreal, and like often if I go out there for a weekend, it's just kind of like, it's like home, it's like a second home to me when I'm not back at like my parents' place. And it's just, we kind of like shut out the world, and there's like nature, and there's just like so much love and respect there. So I think it's about being around the people that really like recharge you as well. And I think also communication is important. That's something you and I have spoken about, and you'll often help me with, like if something's bothering you, or you're feeling uneasy about a situation, like how can you communicate with X person, or with yourself, or whatever that is, to like better understand it. That's something that really helps me, especially with like situations that make me anxious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I like how you touched on just the importance of a support system. Like I know like you share a lot of the texts that your dad sends you. And I think oftentimes a lot of people feel like, well, my family's not there for me. In some cases they might not be, or like they might not have a lot of close friends. And your support system doesn't necessarily have to be your friends or your family. Like, some people are unfortunately dealt a really shitty hand in that regard. And, support systems can be people you've met online, that you connect with on any level. It's, I think the most important thing is just paying mind to how you feel when you're around or talking to or engaging with certain people. And that's really what makes up a support system, is who you feel supported by, who you feel like you can be yourself and feel good, around.
Yeah, and you know what I find too, and I think this is city dependent, because there's cities like New York where people are like so busy, or like, okay, we're not super friendly here. But I find sometimes in its simplest form, like if I'm just like in back-to-back meetings, or I'm feeling really drained or whatever, I'll like go down the street to one of the coffee shops and just like be nice to people, like say hi to the barista. I'd be like, how are you? Are you sometimes just simple human interaction feels like self-care to me. It like grounds you. It reminds you that you're a part of a larger piece of this world. It reminds you to like step outside of yourself and our innate self-involvement sometimes. And so I think it's so important to like in how you interact with the world, in how you feel. Like if I go outside tonight and I'm like running errands, or I'm going to my Jaybird class or whatever, and I'm like mad and I'm in a rush and I'm running late, and I'm like, the world interacts with me back that way, I find. Whereas like if I like take a minute and I'm like, I don't know if this person who's walking slowly in front of me had the worst day of their life today, or maybe they hurt their Achilles and they can, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why. So I am just going to greet them with like kindness and compassion. And I feel like that comes back to you. And I genuinely feel like that is like my daily form of self-care.
Yeah.
Because I walk through the world most of the time and I'm like, I like it here, like
Yeah.
people are nice, the vibes are good. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. So I encourage people to try that more often.
Have you ever heard of the levels of consciousness? Like, do you ever see a chart at all on it?
Yes. I feel like I've seen this chart.
It's cool because it kind of reminds me of that. It's like, what you kind of lead with and what you put out into the world is what you're more inclined to either receive or how you're going to perceive the world. And I think that's, something that at the end of the day is the one thing we have in our control. We can't control like how other people are going to treat us, but we can control like how we treat them, or how we, choose to respond to that situation. If someone treats us in a bad way, whatever it might be. And yeah, I think that's a cool chart. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to check it out, Maybe one day I'll post it on the MENTL.SESH account.
Because I think so, like that saying is so true, of like people won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I like so believe that. I remember my mom saying that to me when I was in like junior high school. She was like, never be the reason that like someone leaves school and had a bad day. You know, like never be the reason that someone comes home and they're like, Katherine was like so mean to me or whatever. Like, and that just is such a guiding principle for me. Like we jump on with our agency team every morning and like, yeah, sometimes I'm tired or I have like other stresses or whatever, but like I do my best to show up there with a smile and positive energy every day because I don't want to pass on how I'm feeling to them. Like I want my team to be feeling like, okay, like I'm motivated. I feel supported. I feel like I can come to KJ if I need to. Like I want the buck to stop with me if I'm carrying the weight of something else. I'm like, I don't want to have that spill out into the world. And I think that so often, like we all can be guilty of dealing with things or like having unprocessed things or whatever that may be. I don't know what's a story of my life that spills onto other people, either in our relationships or in our everyday interactions or whatever that is. And like, I think it's really important to try to take accountability as much as we can to like own those things, address them ourselves, and then like redirect positive energy into the world instead. And I struggle with that often. Like that is a work in progress for me, as I think most people.
Yeah.
But I think if we
even
all,
neutral energy, you
yeah,
know?
totally. Just like net zero is better than like, let me pour all of my XYZ to you. And I think it's true too that like in any partnership, and I'm sure you find this like in your marriage, I find this with my business partners, with my dear friends, like I think it's Brene Brown, who you love, that I've seen say this. She's like, people can't show up like 50-50. Like some days I have to be 70 because they need to be 30. And it's like, where do you need to be so that we can net out at 100 here?
50-50 rarely exists. You know, that's the reality. It's not, it's barely ever going to be 50-50. And once we can accept that, that's when we'll be able to just live our lives better, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, 100%. And even just being able to be like, I am not at my 100 today. So like, this is what I need from you to do whatever. And I feel like you and I have that dynamic in friendship, but also in our business relationship. You know, we all have that in our relationship, and it makes a huge difference to be able to be like, I am not present today. Like, this is what I need for you to support that or whatever it is. And let's find the balance.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question. This is a fun one. What 3 things do you pack in your carry-on to help support your mental health?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I always bring my notebook. Actually, I have it next to me. I have this one actually from All-Star Weekend right now, this Jordan one. I always have my notebook. I always have my noise canceling headphones. To me, I can just shut out the world anywhere I can and either hop on like a calm meditation or just music. Like I find so many of my playlists will just like bring me back to earth. And my last one is probably just my go-to capsule wardrobe that includes like my shoes. And that may sound silly to people, but I think when you feel good about like when you just feel good and you go out in the world and you're like, I feel comfortable, I feel like myself, it's an act of self-care. And so like I know for me, I'm like, you could probably name them. There's like 4 pairs of shoes that I always wear. Like I just am like, I don't leave without them. I'm like always wearing them. And I know that I'm just like happy I have them. What were you gonna say?
Your Mars yards.
I'm like always, I'm just like, I'm happy, I'm here. And like, you know, I love a good like a McDowell's tee or like my MENTL.SESH tees and like just yeah, I would say like knowing the pieces that always make me feel good. Cause even like you and I'll be getting ready for an event or something, or we'll be at like who knows where we are. We're always all over and we're like getting dressed and you're like, you know what? I thought I wanted to wear this, but I'm not feeling it. But I know that I can go back to like, I'm gonna throw on a turtleneck and some Mars yards. I'm gonna be feeling great. So I think that just like knowing those pieces, and that's why like I get people tease me because I like have a bit of a carry-on presence on TikTok. And I always say to people, I'm like, if you haven't worn this in 8 months and you think like this week is the time that you want to wear your like tiered ballerina skirt, absolutely not. Like carry-ons are not for one-time pieces. Carry-ons are for the go-tos, the consistent. Like think of your carry-on as like packing your people. Like it is your tribe.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm gonna make a TikTok about that right now.
Top 5. You're starting 5.
Yeah, you're starting five. Who's in your starting five? Like shoes and clothes. Like I love a good black sweater, like I'm feeling good right now.
Yeah. And when in doubt, stay with your friend in Brooklyn and just borrow their clothes if you
100%.
need.
I'm just like, Liz, I'm coming over. Can I take your cowboy boots? And mine couldn't fit. And really good friends are like, yeah, which ones do you want? Black or red?
All right. So, do you want to let the people know where they can find you, connect with you, slide in your DMs for coffee dates? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you can find me on the gram at Beachy KJ, beach with a Y. I don't want to talk about it. And then you can most certainly follow Common Ace because that's definitely like kind of the next platform that I'm super excited about. And you can also always find us at Counterculture World. We get to do some really cool things like support our girl Liz and MENTL.SESH and all of the amazing endeavors that you're always up to. So we can drop those handles below. But yeah, my DMs really are open. I think that my DMs are all too open. I'm like, yeah, let's chat, let's talk. Like my favorite thing to do is to connect with someone who's like, hey, I'm interested in XYZ. If I can help or give you any level of direction or introduction, I'm more than happy to. Like that really feeds my soul. So, and thank you so much because I love getting to have these types of chats with you.
Yay. No, I'm done for the day. My therapy session, my sessions are over.
And you got an impromptu therapy session with me. I have one last question, actually, that I want to finish this off for you.
Oh God.
When something that I have spoken about in therapy before is a lack of routine because I travel so constantly.
Yeah.
I don't find that I miss home so much as I miss a level of routine. And I'm wondering what some examples of like rituals you maybe encourage people to have, or like what those rituals can look like that you see or hear that like can help give that sense of routine that people like myself may feel like they're missing.
Yeah. I mean, I think, thinking of what's practical, when it comes to routine, like you're not going to be able to, if you're someone who wants to wake up and make this elaborate breakfast every morning for yourself and, make a smoothie, that's great. But like when you're on the go, like that's probably not realistic. So, thinking of like, what are things that I can do consistently in the morning that, or in the evening or during the day, that makes sense for my lifestyle. So it might be journaling. You can pack a journal in your carry-on. You can take that with you pretty much anywhere as long as it's convenient. Music, podcasts, listening to podcasts, if that's something you want to do in the morning. Like a routine could just be like waking up and putting on a certain playlist and kind of starting your day on that note with like an uplifting playlist. It could just be exercise, or moving your body. It doesn't have to be a specific type of workout because it might not be attainable in every place you're at, but like maybe it's just stretching in the morning, or maybe it's just like drinking a glass of water, or it's this small, manageable, realistic things. When you think of like SMART goals, they're short, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So you kind of taking some of that concept and like putting that into the idea of building your own routine and being okay with trial and error. Like it might be that when you're in LA, you want to go to Erewhon and get a smoothie, and that could be part of the LA routine. Having the mental flexibility is super important, and oftentimes that mental flexibility is something that will translate into so many other areas of your life that will be beneficial. But knowing that like, okay, in LA, this is kind of what my routine looks like. In New York, this is what my routine looks like, and being okay with that, or finding something that's super small and manageable that you can do consistently everywhere. It's not really a one size fits all, but just finding what works for you is what I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's so true. Like even, finding like a workout class that you can go to that like makes you feel grounded, or like maybe it's me getting a walk in the morning. Like I definitely do try to implement those things because otherwise I feel just like a little bit lost when I'm living out of a suitcase for a month at a time or whatever that is, and you're not in your own space and all of those things. So that's super helpful. We should make a little like infographic for that for people,
Yeah. Something else I would say too, and I've talked to a lot of my clients actually lately about this, is like the idea of like getting up an extra hour earlier so you can devote that time specifically for you and your own goals, because there's something about working on yourself, working toward your own goals before you log on to work for someone else or do work for something else, that is really motivating and encouraging. And, you know, it really sets a good tone for your day. So that's even something that can be part of the routine, is like wherever you're at, just get up an extra hour earlier if possible, and, you know, do something toward your own goals, whether that's just, I don't know,
Oh,
financial, whatever goals they are. But yeah.
I love that you said that, because I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Silk, a couple weeks ago, where I was telling him about Common Ace and how I just hadn't quite, I don't know if we'll even make the interview, but I just, you know, I was dragging my feet on a certain part of it or whatever. And he said, is that yours? Like, is that like predominantly your project? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so how you put that on the back burner is a reflection of how you treat yourself. Like, you put all the other things for all the other people ahead of you, and like, what's for you. And it's so true. Like, I always say, you know, if I book a 6:30 a.m. workout, there's a 50-50 chance I am not making that 6:30 a.m. workout. But if I told one of my girlfriends that I was going to be there, I'm not going to miss it, because, you know, I told Rhea I was going to be there. So I'm going to be there.
Mhm.
And I think that is something I'm becoming so much more acutely aware of, is like, your self-confidence comes from keeping the promises that you make to yourself.
Mhm.
And I know that you have said that, and we've had this conversation before, and I am like working very much so on internalizing that, because I think it's so true. Like, why is it that I would never show up late or miss a meeting or miss a deadline for any of the other projects or things I'm accountable to, but I have no problem doing it for myself?
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that probably a lot of us are guilty of, and
Yeah.
need to work on. So I love that you said that, because I agree, like, just making that time for yourself and your own goals, like, then you feel happy and accomplished, and you're able to show up for other people in a more impactful way.
Mhm. Exactly.
I love
Exactly.
how love
Well,
chatting with you, my friend.
yes, likewise. All right. So you know where to find KJ, at the beach or on social media. But thank you for tuning in to a FaceTime with Mental Sesh, and see us next week for our new episodes. Bye.
Bye.